Hey everyone, it's Mark Ferguson with Investor More, and today I'm talking about how I got the money and was able to buy my very first rental property. And I've talked a little bit about that property, I've shown that property before, but I don't know if I've really gone into detail on how I was able to buy it because I didn't have a lot of money back then. And things have changed. They've gotten a little different. And it's pretty crazy. The other day I was kind of calculating all the real estate I own and how much it's worth. And right now, all the properties that I own are valued at about $22 million. And that's not all equity. I do have loans against it. I think I have $12 million in loans or something like that right now. But that is all 100% my real estate. So you might see some people who say under management or listing numbers of how much real estate they own. A lot of times that's just a portion, but I do have two properties where I have a partner on them, and I took out that partner's share to come up with that. So pretty crazy to think of where I've gotten to after buying my first rental in 2010. Now I was in real estate a while before that, but I really did not start to build wealth until that very first rental property was bought, and I realized how awesome rentals were from that point. All right, so talk a little bit about that real estate that I own now, where it comes from, how it's calculated, and what kind of properties those are. And then I'll also talk about, like I said, how I got that first property, how I was able to get the money for it, and how that helped catapult me to where I am today. Of course, I love the likes, love the shares, love the comments. Keep those coming. And if you like this type of video too, let me know. I can do a little bit more about different properties I own, how they've done, things like that. I know we've had a lot of crazy stuff on the channel of evictions and squatters and break-ins and crime and a lot of bad real estate stuff happening. But there's a lot of good real estate that let me get to this point to where I could handle those things and them not be that big of a deal. All right, so first off, let's take a look at what real estate I own currently, how it's valued, and why, even though I own $22 million of real estate, that might not be as big of a deal as it seems on the surface. All right, so if you follow me on different social platforms, you know I do a lot on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Well, I use Canva for a lot of my stuff, and I'm real lazy and just popping up on my Canva to show you this meme I made from a few weeks ago, just showing where the value of my real estate is right now. And you can see I've got about $16.35 million worth of rentals. That's commercial, residential, and I think our river house is in there too, which I don't really use as a rental, but I've thought about it, and that's where that value comes from. $8 million of loans against those. Flips, I've got over $5 million worth of flips right now with $3.5 million of loans against them. And that's something where if I sell those flips, I'm obviously going to make some money, but that $22 million number could fluctuate greatly if I sell a bunch of flips, don't buy as many. The complex is counted as one flip right now, which is for sale for $1.2 million. So there's a lot of different stuff going on with the flips, and that increases, decreases that big number there. And then my personal house, which is worth about that. It's hard to value properties like that where I'm at in Greeley. There's kind of a $1 million kind of ceiling almost for properties. So I think that's pretty accurate though about what it's worth. And my loan is pretty low on that now. I think I've had that loan for 7 years, and I bought that house for $560 back in 2013. And like most of the flips are recent, but rentals I've had since 2010 up to now, a mix of commercial and residential properties. Now, it says I have $10.5 million of equity in those properties, but it's not like I could just sell those tomorrow and all of a sudden have $10 million worth of cash. I'd have selling costs, maybe some repair costs, some different things to sell those. For the flips, when I value them, I try to value them of what they're worth right now, not their after repaired value, unless they're already repaired. So if I have a flip I just bought, I will value that at what I bought it for, maybe if I got a really good deal, a little bit more, but I'm not valuing it at what it's worth after fixed up, unless I've already fixed it up. And this brings up another good reminder too, that even though I've got all this equity, it's tied up in real estate. It's not like I have millions and millions of dollars of cash just sitting in bank accounts. I wish I did, but I don't. Real estate is very cash intensive. Real estate investors have to be very careful about keeping enough cash, having enough cash for all those expenses, for payments, property taxes, insurance, repairs, all of that stuff. And even, billionaires in general, if you read some of their stories like Ted Turner, they don't have just billions of dollars of cash sitting around. A lot of them were almost broke. They had billion-dollar valuations on their companies, had almost no cash themselves because all their money was in the company. They spent all their money building it, and it's not like they're just sitting around with all this money burning a hole in their pocket. Some are, some aren't, but it's a billion-dollar net worth doesn't mean what a lot of people think it means. $10 million in equity doesn't mean what a lot of people thinks it means. It's still really cool. I'm very proud that I've gotten to this point, but there's some different caveats that come with that as well, especially the flips. If we sell those, I'm not going to have $1.6 million of cash coming back to me because we'll have selling costs, other costs, and different things going into those properties. All right, so back to the main point of this. How did I get my money for my first rental property? All right, so this story goes back a ways to 2009 or so. I graduated college in 2001. Went to work with my dad doing manual labor stuff on flips, different stuff, making $10 an hour, living in an apartment as the on-site manager to save money. I was driving around in my 91 Mustang 5.0. I did have a supercharger on it. It was a fun car, but I wasn't just oozing money out back then either. I eventually became a real estate agent, got my license, but never really got very far or had any savings or investments the first 4 or 5 years as an agent. Eventually I got into REO, started selling foreclosures for banks, for HUD, things like that. And I started making a lot more money. I was making, over $100,000 a year, which I thought was crazy back then. That's always a goal of mine. But again, I wasn't really saving money, didn't have all these investments. $100,000 a year seems like so much when you're younger. And then when you start making it, it's like, wow, a lot of this goes to taxes and different things and different expenses. And I remember even asking my uncle who did my taxes at the time, like, hey, how do I pay less taxes? And his answer was, well, it's a good thing you pay so many taxes. It means you're making a lot of money. It's like, well, that wasn't really the answer I was looking for. So I ended up getting a different accountant. But I learned that it's not always best to take advice from accountants for finance, for investing. Accountants can be great, very smart. Some are great with investment advice. Some aren't so much. But I realized I had to kind of figure out myself what the best route was for investing. And I read books. I did all kinds of research. I really had an open mind about whether it's real estate or stocks or bonds or businesses or franchises or whatever it was. And even though I was in real estate, there were very few people who told me rental properties were a great investment back in 08, 09, 07, when the housing market was crashing. My dad owned a couple rentals, but I don't think he really looked into it that much. He just had a couple of good deals that popped up and ended up keeping them. My sister had some rentals. They're college rentals. They got trashed a lot. I was not attracted to those at all. I'm like, ooh, that sounds horrible. And I had to find my own way just in reading a lot of books. And one of the books that really opened my eyes was Gary Keller's Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And it just talked about real estate investing, buying rentals, building net worth, cash flow, all these different things that I'd never really heard that many people talk about. And back then the internet was around, but you didn't have websites or blogs or YouTube talking about real estate, how amazing it was and how great it was. Things are so different now with all of that. And so I kind of had to learn that on my own. And I figured out rentals were what I wanted. Everything I read, everything I learned kept pointing towards real estate. So I knew I wanted to buy rental properties, but it still took me a very long time to get to my first deal and buy my first rental. And this house is not my first rental, but it has to do with that. This is the second house I bought. I bought it with my wife in 2009. My first house I bought in 2003 for $190,000. Ended up selling it for $180,000 in 2009. But one of the reasons I sold it was because we were buying this one, and it was a fantastic deal. And this is when it sold when it was new for $320,000 in 2005. And I bought it as a foreclosure for $210,000 in 2009. And I looked a long time. It took me at least 6 months, took us at least 6 months to find a house that we wanted. This house wasn't for sale. We actually ended up driving by it. I did some research, found out it's going to the foreclosure sale. Ended up borrowing money from my sister, my father-in-law, to buy the house at the foreclosure sale because you had to have cash. You still do have to have cash the same day to buy at the foreclosure sale. I didn't have that cash available. So we went to the sale, bid on the house, we're the high bidders. We're super excited, except back then, I think still today, junior lien holders can redeem a property. So if there's a second loan, a judgment, something like that, well, a judgment came along and tried to redeem the property, and it was an HOA lien. I found out who it was, talked to the guy. After a week of negotiating, we ended up paying him off so he wouldn't redeem the property. It's all legal, no problem with doing that. And we got the property. So after I had the property, I refinanced it, paid off my father-in-law, paid off my sister, and we had our house with a long-term loan. Well, this was a house we we're going to live in, and it didn't need that much work. We never changed the carpet, only did a little bit of painting. Really cool house. But I still wanted to buy rental properties. And so after having it like 6 months to a year, I figured out, after talking to a local bank, I could refinance it. I think we did a 95% loan to value refinance, which means if it's worth $200,000, you could get a loan for $190,000. You can do the math for different values there. And I knew I got a really good deal on this property. I think it appraised for $280,000 a little bit after I bought it. Got a refinance, was able to take out about $50,000 tax-free from the property, because a refinance is not income. When you take cash out, it's tax-free. And that was the money I used to buy my very first rental property, was the refinance from this house. Even though I was making good money, it literally had sold over 200 houses a couple of years during the foreclosure housing crisis that were HUD homes. Like I said, I had a lot of income, but I also had to pay a lot of commissions to my dad, who was still running the real estate team, had to pay a lot of taxes on that money, had expenses, had different things going on. It's crazy how much, you have to make to be able to really save a lot of money, unless you're just completely and totally disciplined, and that has never been me. So I've tried to save money, been smart about things, but I'm not one of these people who, is a bare minimalist, frugal person. You might be able to tell that by the Lamborghinis I have. I don't know. So I had this money, and now it was time to try and find that first rental property. All right, so I looked for properties. I had actually thought about buying some rentals before. Again, not because I really had done all the research and knew what was they were such a good investment, just because I thought, I want to invest in something. I know some people buy rentals, maybe it's a good idea. And I actually had one under contract a couple years earlier, backed out of it, and honestly, I don't think I would have had the money to buy it anyway, because after closing costs and down payment, all of that, I think I would have been short. So it's a good thing I didn't try and go through with that purchase. But now I had the money. I had this cash where I could put 20-25% down. And so this property popped up for sale. Just a beautiful, gorgeous architectural design of a box and 3 windows. But it was cheap. And this actually isn't the listing that I bought it from. This is when it was a foreclosure before that. It sold for $107,000 in 2008. Again, 1,300 square feet, no basement, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, as basic as you could get. But I thought it was a cool house because it met my guidelines as a rental property, and this is the listing where I bought it. And I know I've talked about this story before, but it came up for sale. I saw it. I liked it. I said, hey, I'm going to make an offer on it. It's below market value. I thought it was worth like around $130,000. I don't know if they have any pictures here. I do have videos I'll link to. Didn't need much work at all. Some paint, maybe some flooring. That was it. Has a yard now, which is nice. And it was an estate sale. And so they had a good price on it. So I made an offer on the property and told the agent, hey, let me know if anything comes up, anything happens on it. I might, be willing to change my offer. Well, a couple days go by, and all of a sudden it's under contract. I'm like, hey, what the heck's going on? It went under contract with another buyer who had offered more than me. And I was not real happy. I kind of told the agent that. I'm like, hey, I thought you were going to tell me. He's like, I'm sorry, I forgot. And so anyway, I was pretty bummed because I thought I was getting this rental. It's going to be my first rental, and it was perfect for me. Well, since I'm talking about it, you might know what happened. And you've seen my other videos, you might know what happened. That first contract fell apart, and he came back to me and said, hey, are you still interested in the property? I said, yes. He said, I can get the sellers to accept your first offer. Let's go for it. We did it, and I went through with buying that property. But it wasn't super easy. For one thing, I had every agent and most people in my life I knew at that time tell me, don't buy real estate. You're making a huge mistake. This is 2010. Values are still going down. But I knew it was still a good investment. It would cash flow. I could rent this for maybe $1,200, well, probably $1,100 a month. I was getting it for less than $100,000. So the numbers make sense. I'd make money. I was getting a good deal. I knew I was going to go forward with it. Now, I tried to get a loan with Bank of America, and that was a nightmare. Working with big lenders and investment properties is very tricky and very difficult. And I believe, it took me, well, we can see here, days to sale, 108 days to close that deal from the time I had it under contract. And I thought it would take me like 35 days. Had to extend it twice. And luckily the seller and agent were okay with me doing that, because Bank of America every 2 weeks would say, hey, we need to know this. Oh, we need to know this. Why do you have a deposit in your account for more than $1,500? It's like, well, I'm a real estate agent. I make a lot of commissions. I have like 50 of those deposits in my account. And they needed like documentation for every deposit and why I was making it and what it was for. And they asked for all my tax returns and kept asking for more and more stuff. And it wasn't like they asked for it all at once. It was every 2 weeks they'd ask for something new. So I could have easily lost this deal too, because of my fault, because of the lender being horrible to work with. I can tell you I never worked with Bank of America again. And I bought my next rentals through a local lender, which was so much easier and so much better. But I did end up getting this deal finally closed, bought the property, and pretty good feeling, cool feeling. And as soon as I bought it, I increased my net worth because, like I said, it had instant equity. I bought it, fixed it up a tiny bit, rented it, and I know I could have sold this for maybe $130,000 to $140,000 after fixing it up just a little bit based on other market comparables. It was a really good deal, but I was also very, very patient and waited months and months and months, well, technically years if you count all the time I spent researching and looking at what I wanted to do to invest my money. After this one, I was able to buy another one about a year later, and then I bought 2 the next year, 3 the next year, ended up buying 16 single-family rentals from 2010 to 2015. Was it good timing? Yes. Did I have any idea the market would go crazy like it did? No. I thought it would go up. I thought it would become normal, but it really just exploded. But even if it hadn't exploded, these properties were still producing monthly income, and I still got great deals on them, and I still would have been just fine. And with the properties, I ended up refinancing some, taking cash out. That allowed me to buy more properties. And doing that kind of over and over again allowed me to keep building my portfolio and buy more properties, add more cash flow, and then get to the point where I was doing bigger and bigger deals, buying more and more properties, doing more flips, etc. Then eventually I got into private money. Other investors came to me to want to help invest in some of these properties as a private money lender, where I pay them a % on the loan. And then that allowed me to do even more deals by doing that, doing bigger deals, etc. So that is kind of how I very first got started buying rentals, building my net worth, getting to the point where I am right now. Before 2010, my net worth might have been, just because of the equity in my house, maybe 50,000, maybe a little more than that, but it's almost all equity in my house, 50 to 70,000, I guess, and a little bit of savings, a little bit of money there. But real estate, buying those rentals, being able to buy that first rental property really sprung me into being able to do all the things I've done now. In the first, 7, 8 years in real estate, not a whole lot happened, but the last 12 or so, a whole lot has happened, and a lot of that was because of rentals. So what happened to that first rental property? Well, I held it until 2019. Rents went up to $1,400. I'd refinanced it once or twice, pulled money out so I could buy more properties, and then it got to a point where it was worth quite a bit, although it's worth more now. And I decided to sell it, take the money, the equity I had in it, and 1031 exchange it to another property. So a 1031 exchange is where you sell one property, buy another one in the same transaction, None of the money comes to me. It is held by someone else, and it all goes into the new property. And by doing that, I don't pay any capital gains taxes on the property or recapture any depreciation. So I sold this property for $275,000 in 2019. Had I waited until 2021 or 2022, it'd probably be worth $350,000. But timing the market is extremely difficult. You can't predict what's going to happen. And I took these proceeds and exchanged it into another property, which also went up in value during that same time, except it was a bigger, more expensive property. So it still worked out okay. And that's what I've done with a lot of my portfolio as well, is sold some of my rentals that maybe don't cash flow as much but have tons of equity, and taken those properties and sold them and either use a 1031 exchange, or in some cases just pay the taxes and use that money to buy better performing, more expensive properties that have more cash flow. And every time I buy a new property, I get a good deal. I don't buy properties at retail price. I always want a good deal. So every time I buy and sell a property, even after the selling costs and even paying some of the taxes, that increases my net worth as well, because I'm getting a really good deal on that next property, or I know I can add a lot of value on that next property. And on these single family homes or other rentals that I've had for a long time and are stabilized, the only way they go up in value is if the market goes up with appreciation. But a new property, I can force that value to go up by making repairs, getting it rented better, using it better, etc. So, sold this one, and this is what I bought. I bought this property for $602, but then I got a roof credit of $10,000 back, so I actually paid like $592 for it. And it's been rented by a fence company, half of it this whole time. Half of it's still vacant. It still makes me money, half vacant. And the reason I've done that, it's been tricky to rent it with the fence company in there, but I've been trying to find the right tenant, or we might have some other plans for it. But this property, I was offered $850,000 for it a couple of years ago. I thought about selling it, but it turns out it was a 7-Eleven who wanted to buy it, tear it down, and build a gas station there. And that would have made me real sad, because I really like this building and it's really cool. And I thought it was worth more than that too. So I think it's worth close to $1 million now, even not rented. If we ever did get it rented, it'd be worth more. But great location, large building, almost 10,000 square feet, and on the busiest corner in the town it is in, which is why that gas station wanted to buy it from me. So yeah, I could have made a little bit more money waiting on that first rental, but I wouldn't have been able to buy this property had I done that. And I was able to take over $150,000 in equity from that property, move it into this one. That ended up being my down payment. And so my loan isn't nearly as high on this one either. And that is another way that I was able to build that wealth, is by selling others and moving into new properties, adding value there. And one last thing I want to say before I kind of end this and help those out there who are looking to get into real estate, looking to do something similar. You don't have to start by putting 20% down, 25% down on a rental. Right now, that's real tough if you have, $300,000 properties to save up that money. And if I were to do things over again, if I was to go back in time and be 21, 22 years old, and I was looking to buy my first house, I think I was actually 23 when I bought my first house, I would do it way differently than I did. Back then, I was just looking for a cool house, a fun house, something I'd enjoy. It was priced decent. Now, I would make sure I got the absolute best deal I could. And after living there a year, I would probably rent it out, repeat the process over and over again. Because when you buy as an owner-occupant, you can put 3.5% down, 5% down, sometimes 0 down with USDA, VA, NACA, some of these other programs. There's down payment assistance programs. There's so many opportunities there. If you can buy as an owner-occupant, you're flexible, you're willing to move a little more often than some people. And so I would have either bought there or lived there for a year, rented it out, or lived there 2 years, fixed it up, sold it. And if you live in a house 2 out of the last 5 years, there's usually no capital gains tax, up to $250,000 for a single person or $500,000 for a couple. You can do the live and flip method as well to help build equity, get yourself in the game, and have that money to invest in rental property. Also, if you are interested in learning more about my journey or information on buying with no money down, financing properties, fixing up properties, getting good deals, all the stuff, check out my blog, investformore.com. Invest, FOURMORE.com. I know my picture is probably in the way, but you can, here, I can just type it in right here so you can see it. Whoops, if I type it right. That's it, investformore.com. And then also on my side here, I've got a free book that kind of goes over that process of me getting to $10 million in equity as well. And then you get notifications when I have new articles and stuff like that. I've got hundreds of free articles on my blog and tons of information on here if you guys are interested there too. So that is kind of my story on how I bought my first rental property. Like I said, if you want me to do more stories like this, I can talk about building wealth after that, different rental properties, switching from residential to commercial, and possibly, I don't know if I want to do this one or not, going over all the properties I have now that make up that $22 million in equity not equity. In real estate, I've got about $10.5 million in equity. All right. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. Love to hear the comments. Like I said, love seeing likes and new subscribers as well. And we'll be back here soon with more videos on our properties. We'll see if this year is as crazy as last year. I think that would be hard to top, but you never know because we've had some crazy stuff going on already. All right. Take care.